ICQ Podcast episode 439, Amateur Radio Book Review 2024. Well, hello fellow amateur radio enthusiasts, and welcome to this, our 439th episode of the ICQ Amateur Radio Podcast, supported this episode by our monthly and subscription donors. In this episode, we join Martin M1MRB, Chris, Mike 0, Tango Charlie Hotel, Frank, Kilo 4, Foxtrot Mike Hotel, and Leslie, Golf 0, Charlie India Bravo, to discuss the latest amateur radio news. Myself, Colin M6BLY, rounds up the news in brief, and this episode's feature is our 2024 Amateur Radio Book Review. Well, as always, it's our very kind donors that keep your ICQ podcast advert free. They show their value by setting up monthly and annual subscription donations to us, which helps us pay our way, and as I say, most importantly, keeps us independent and away from the influence of advertisers. We would ask you to consider doing the same thing. It's a very simple thing to do. Think of the value you found from our show today. Then visit icqpodcast.com/donate, where, as I say, there's options there to send that donation to us. Right, now we're going to start creating that value by joining Martin, Chris, Frank and Leslie to discuss and generate thoughts about the latest amateur radio news, including exploding communication devices and defending amateur radio bands. As always, hope you enjoy.
Hi guys, and welcome to episode 439 of the ICQ podcast, and tonight's round table for that episode. Tonight, a little bit short on numbers, but we're still going to have fun, and we'll still probably be over the top as always. I have Mr. Chris Howard, M0TCH, with me.
Good evening, Martin. Good evening, guys.
Hi, Chris. Good evening to have you with us. I also have Mr. Frank Howell, K4FMH. Hi, Frank.
Waving at you from across the pond. Welcome. I'm glad to be here, Mark.
Yeah, shame we haven't got video on, isn't it? This is an audio-only podcast, because I'm sure it would get very silly very quickly.
No!
Yeah, it would. And also this side of the pond, we have Mr. Leslie Butterfields, G0CIB. Hi, Leslie.
Hi, Martin. Good evening, all.
Yeah, good evening. Now, our other two presenters, Mr. Bill Barnes, WC3B, suddenly got called away for work issues, so he's not going to be with us tonight. And Mr. Martin Ruffle, M0SGL, is not very well. He can hardly talk. He rang in for a few minutes, and he sounded like Barry White, and we
absolutely
had some fun about it, but he's lost his voice. So Martin, get well soon. So just the four of us tonight. Right. This one was breaking news pretty much today, but Hezbollah devices, how did they explode and who was responsible, which was on the BBC News. And this talks about, I don't know, explosives inside walkie-talkies or handy-talkies, as you call them in the States, going bang. So, Chris, do you want to go first on this one?
Yeah, so this is a headline news story all over the world at the moment. So there's been an attack on Hezbollah, who were based in Lebanon, on, what's today, Wednesday. So Tuesday, there was, apparently Hezbollah used pagers to communicate, because apparently mobile phones aren't secure enough. Apparently it's a way of locating where somebody is, so they decided to use pagers. And there seems to have been a coordinated attack and probably a highly sophisticated one, where a bunch of these pages, in fact, hundreds if not thousands of these pages, have all kind of exploded within around about an hour. How that's been done, it all sounds very kind of James Bond, and assuming it's been some kind of supply chain. Someone's managed to infiltrate the supply chain before they got to those end users and did something to make them do that. But then today. So today's Wednesday, the 18th of September, it's been reported in the news that there's been a similar attack, but this time, rather than being through pagers, being through handheld radios. Now, we're not going to name the manufacturer today because it would be unfair on them. I think it's extremely unlikely the manufacturer, in fact, I can pretty much say with certainty the manufacturer won't be involved in this. This is where someone has interfered with the devices before they've got to the end user and then use them as an explosive device to injure people, which I don't think this manufacturer would have any interest in getting involved with. Interestingly, that particular manufacturer, the model of handheld, you can look on the internet and probably find it for yourself. There's lots of places that are reporting this particular handheld device and its model number. It's actually an amateur radio. It's a VHF amateur radio. And the manufacturer does actually warn customers that there are counterfeit models out there. This particular model hasn't been around. It's reported for about 10 years, so it's not a new model. But there is, the manufacturer does have a web page that tells you how to identify genuine articles. So whether or not, there's certainly a picture circulating of one particular handheld, which is of this model. We don't know if that's the only model affected, whether it's other manufacturers affected, or devices manufactured by others affected. We don't know if this is a counterfeit model, whether it's a genuine model. It could frankly have been any manufacturer or any model if this has been interfered with or tampered with by a third party. But this is obviously a kind of act of war, essentially, and quite a sophisticated one. And there are fairly strong rumours as to who may have done this. That's probably for others to talk about. But quite frightening that the sort of stuff that we use could be used in this way. So I'll pass it back to you, Martin.
Yeah, I agree with you, Chris. And a few years ago, I used to work repairing handy-talkies, and most of them are commercial ones, not necessarily for amateur use. But a lot of these radios have a lot of extra circuitry in that we don't use as amateurs, and you just have to be careful. Somebody's done this deliberately. Now, before you all rush out and instantly blame China for this, it wasn't a Chinese radio, one of the cheaper Chinese radios. That's all I'm going to say. It could have been any radio. It could have been any radio or any electric device with a receiver in it. So, don't instantly go for the manufacturer on this one. Frank, what's your thoughts on it?
Well, here, great intro, Chris. And let me just say this. The manufacturer, as Martin alluded, was predicated on the following tradecraft. If you want to infiltrate a particular group, you're going to use what they use. Why would they buy X when they use Y? So it doesn't matter that it was a particular manufacturer. So the tradecraft was that the supply chain, according to the New York Times, on the pagers, we may not be so sure about the handy-talkies yet, but the pagers that were being used by Hezbollah participants were intercepted, some type of explosive inserted next to the battery or therein somewhere, and tied in electronically to a particular page. We see this all the time on fictional TV stories and in movies where there's a bomb that's going to go off and there's a remote cell phone that when that number's dialed, it's going to go boom, right? I mean, that's out in the open. In this case, it was simply, let's get these secreted into the group that we want to attack. And when we believe they're in place at a time of our choosing, we will send the magic page and it goes boom, right? So the New York Times has been working with U.S. intelligence officials, and I'm just parroting what they have reported. So again, doesn't matter what brand of pager, doesn't matter what brand handy-talkie, but a similar thing was apparently propagated through a well-known land mobile, perhaps, handy-talkie. And it's we're in a complicated world, and tradecraft understands that. So, Martin, that's my sense of what's happened.
Yeah, it's as I say, it's a horrible thing what happens in war and what people do to each other. And yeah, this was probably being set up a long, long time ago to get the devices into the places. You wouldn't necessarily go out and buy 200 pages in one go. So it could have been, a repair centre that's done this work or whatever. I don't know. I'm only guesstimating. Leslie, what's your thoughts on this one?
First of all, I think Chris has covered it excellently. He's covered all the base points very, very well indeed. And your comments, Martin and Frank, I agree with fully. The thing is, as radio amateurs, we learn about these things. We learn about circuitry and all that. It's fun for us. And, we talk to people around the world on a friendly human basis, because that's what we are, and that's part of the hobby. No doubt certain people are using it for nefarious means, and I really, really don't know what to say with that, because it just goes against the grain. That's all from me.
Yeah, it's a difficult one on that, in fairness. As I say, having worked on commercial radios, there are all sorts of things you can get them to do. And if you hijack the output to do something else, that could be horrible.
Yeah.
But let's face it, there are a lot of these things, and I'll tell you about a couple of them, is man down, which is usually on a tilt switch. So if somebody's fallen down and hasn't got up, it'll send an alarm. Lone worker, where if you don't respond to the PTT within a certain period of time, it will send an alarm out for you. And I know that police radios, I certainly know that police radios have both those features. And they also have, if it's been stolen and they know that they're never going to get it back, or it's been compromised, they can send not only a stun, you can stun a lot of these radios until you re-get them back, but on the police radios, you can actually send a signal out that burns out the tracks inside. So it puts a short across the power line, battery line, and effectively burns the PCB out in the radio if it's compromised. So there's a lot of things these radios do that we don't necessarily know about. Somebody quite clever did something very, very naughty, let's put it that way. And sorry if I'm telling you more about the technology than you probably ought to do, but this sort of thing is available in the radios. Right, let's move to our next news story, hopefully a little bit more happier story. The ARRL defends 902 to 928 megahertz amateur band. Now, Frank, we don't have that band here in the UK. Many people on it in your part of the world?
I think it's spotty, just like some of our niche activities. 900 megahertz is popular. I would say primarily in two areas that are metropolitan, where there's a big cluster of hams. You're likely to have enough hams, participating to make it worthwhile. If you're one off out in the Rocky Mountains, up on a big hill, you may, be able to communicate to the cities down below. So those are two areas where there's probably the most activity. We don't really have a lot of good data on it. We are secondary users in that particular region. And so not unlike the 70 centimeters, where we are secondary, we are there. So the comeuppance of the ARRL's defense, what are they defending against? Well, commercial interest. And there is a commercial vendor called NextNav. They do a location and monitoring service. They want to completely reorganize 902 to 928 megahertz and replace this location monitoring system with high powered, as they say, who knows what that means exactly, 5G cellular and location service. Now, let me just comment here, because many hams may not realize how many federal agencies deal with their responsibilities. I know there's a lot of jokes about, I'm from the government, I'm going to help you, ha ha. Well, I've been one. I was GS-15, which is the highest level of civil service you can get without a presidential appointment, for several years with the Department of Agriculture. And back, for example, when organic food began to emerge as something that was desirable and had a market and that kind of thing, there was no regulation on what makes something organic. So you might import some bananas. You say, hey, I'm going to put organic on them and I'm going to raise them 50%. There was nothing there to stop you. So USDA regulates these kind of food labels. So people work in the building there. And so what do? They don't know everything. what they do as a federal agency is they try to get comments from the different stakeholders. And in this case, the FCC does this through request for comment. And they want those who might be affected to have comments. And that's technically how that works. It's just not that they know all and see all. They do that through comments. So the ARRL, being our main representative, has filed a petition through the comment system to say, well, they're wrong when they say in their petition that it won't affect amateur radio operations. And they go in some detail there. Even though we're secondary, it doesn't necessarily mean that NAVTEX can go in and grab it all, at least not without a discussion and some lobbying on the FCC's part. So in a nutshell, that's what's going on, Martin.
Yeah, it's interesting how it's, as you say, it's more commercial than it is probably amateur. But back in the day, and I know this would have been CB guys for you, write to me about it, but UK used to have, I think it was 930 megs, didn't they, Leslie?
I know the guy that used to run it. He's a member of Colin is a member of our Silverthorne Radio Club. So he used to do their magazine and all their membership and all that stuff. So he was well into that.
Well, I've never done the 930 meg or whatever it was, but I know that we used it for a while, and then the CB has lost it because the mobile phone networks come along. So,
pretty much with a big check,
yeah, commercial once again. So,
Martin, the golden rule is the man with gold makes the rules.
That's very true. Unfortunately. Yeah. Chris, what's your thoughts on this one?
So, I wasn't aware that they had this ban in the States, but I think this is a good example of where having a national society to apply pressure and to represent amateur radio operators is a really good idea. And clearly the ARRL are doing their important task here in trying to protect this bit of the spectrum to allow amateurs, even though it's secondary use, to allow amateurs to continue to use these frequencies. Yeah, that's all I've got to say really on this one. It's not a band they've ever used, but it seems like this company is perhaps. I will say this is providing them some value in having these frequencies, and they're going to be trying to. That's the reason I suppose why we have to defend our spectrum, I suppose, and that's one of the primary, or certainly one of the important things that our national societies do for us.
Yeah, well, at least the ARRL, as you say, are doing something, which is a good thing.
I was just listening to Frank, and what he was talking about, the process of getting the consultation. The players have got different names over here, but the ascent process is exactly the same. And Chris is absolutely spot on. This is what national societies are there for. They're there to defend the interests of radio amateurs and things like, even if you're a secondary user, it doesn't matter. And I think at some point, it's they've got to sit down in the room and try and work their way through this. It's the only way. Over to you, Martin.
Yeah, no problems. Well, that's the one. Moving to our next news story, and unfortunately, because Bill got hijacked away by work, he's one of our two guys who do use FT8, but FT8 SUPERFOX, which I believe is some kind of security tag or system within FT8, has been hijacked. So, Frank, you do a bit of FT8. What do you think?
I do, and I've not used SUPERFOX, but I've been following the development. And although listeners may, say, "Hey, you missed this," or "That's not right," or whatever, in general, it's a new super duper mode to have a fox, like fox hunting, where we do directional types of things, be able to work multiple stations at once. Oh, why would anybody want to do that? De-expedition. So we'll have someone on a de-expedition, they're the fox, and then they can work, say, 9 stations at one time. Oh, but then how do you know it's really that rare entity? Oh, I know what we'll do. We'll do a security key. This is what we do with so many other computer-based things that do that. But let's look at what's going on. WSJTX is put out and published open source by a team led by Joe Taylor at Princeton, Nobel laureate, and someone named Frankie at University of Illinois, and some others. So, and one is now Silent Key, one of the other participants in the project. Well, it's just been phenomenal. It's been phenomenal success across a number of modes. Whisper is another mode besides FT8 that WSJTX software facilitates. Now, they're software developers and they do weak signal work, and that's what they do. They don't run contests. So here we go. The success of the FT8 mode as put out by WSJTX is causing an increased burden. Well, in comes the Northern California DX Foundation. They're a very powerful group in the sense that they have money and they give money and they fund different things. And so, as Leslie said, the golden rule was they have a lot of clout because they have some high-powered DXers and they generate a fair amount of money. Don't believe me? Just try to start a new contest that coincides with the California DX party. Should I say Portable Operations Challenge? So they said, okay, we'll do the key. We'll manage the keys. So they start doing this. All sounds great, right? Well, then some people didn't get a key allocated for what they wanted. And, well, you're playing favorites. And so suddenly there's some grumbling. Then there's a de-expedition and someone hacks the key. Now, if Bill were here, he would tell you it's not that hard. And I used to have a lab of students that could have done this probably in the afternoon and more likely in the evening when I wasn't around, could do this. It is not hard. And so I just raised the question, while it was the gut reaction, the genuflection to we'll do a security key, is that the right approach to protect the integrity of a de-expedition entity, on a rare entity that you don't get to work it very often, right? That's why we have these expensive de-expeditions. Is that the mode to validate the station as the only one? Because unfortunately, we've had bad players who might be in Dallas, Texas, saying they're in the Seychelles Islands or whatever. And how you going to know? How you going to know? So I'll end with that, Martin. That's it. For the most part, I may have had a fact or two off, but I don't think in the main that I'm very far from the situation.
Yeah, that's a good one you said. Now, to my point, yeah, and I don't do FT8, so I can be shot down on this one, guys. But it sounds like FT8 and having a HF transceiver and having it all set up and knowing how to do this is very unlikely to be a true pirate. In my opinion, I could be wrong, but I think it's probably unlikely a true pirate. Therefore, it's got to be a disgruntled amateur. Then why would a disgruntled amateur hijack a de-expedition data so that people will use it? That to me,
this is why I mentioned the grumbling.
Yeah.
There's kind of a backlash against the Northern California DX Foundation for being a white knight, if you will, for trying to do something good, but then being maybe perceived as not being even-handed with it.
Yeah.
That's just my interpretation, Martin. I could be wrong too.
No. Well, let's just say it just seems sometimes us amateurs are very good at screwing our own hobby up.
It's the equivalent of the QRMers.
Yep.
Who get on certain frequencies and they don't like the people that kind of, that's their watering hole. So they power up their amp and just transmit something over them. At least that's my interpretation. I could be wrong. We'd love to be wrong, but that's my take on that.
Yeah, understood, Frank. Chris, what's your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, okay. So I've not actually heard, I'll be honest, I've not heard of SUPERFOX mode before, but I kind of get it. I kind of get the idea that it's about getting that confirmation that you really are speaking to or receiving that particular, you are having a QSO with that particular station. I don't know how big. I don't often work the expedition, so I don't know how big an issue it is. It clearly is an issue if someone's found a solution. I'm reasonably familiar with encryption keys and signing keys, working in IT. It sounds like, I'm not sure exactly what method's being used here, but it sounds like cracking it hasn't been a particularly difficult task. And in terms of attributing, who's actually done this, I guess we can speculate. But bit of a shame that this has happened, and I'm sure that someone will go back now and look to fix this and perhaps update SUPERFOX, or perhaps use a stronger key, or perhaps manage the keys a little bit better. Because often it's not the actual encryption or the signing that's the issue. That's the technology. It's the management of the keys, and if someone's been a little bit less than, and I don't know how this may not be the case here, but if someone perhaps hasn't handled the keys in the right way, that can also be a way for these things to get compromised. So a bit of a shame, but I'm sure that they will fix this fairly soon, and it will be resolved.
Yeah. Well, Leslie, I know you don't do FT8, or I'm pretty sure you don't, but it's, doing this sort of thing by, hijacking stuff. I mean, it's a bit like me sitting in London calling CQ with my American call sign, which I'm not allowed to do off US territory. But if I sat in London and called CQ with my American call sign, people in the south of England would be overexcited they're suddenly going to work an American station, and I ain't there. So I think this is kind of what these guys do.
Well, I can say a similar story. Yeah. Sorry, Martin, just on that, it's a similar thing. When I've been in the States before, operating with my US call sign, and we've had other stations, I haven't quite got my full call sign. We're thinking I was in the UK, and of course I was probably only a few miles away. But because they hadn't quite heard my whole call sign, they just heard the accents, they thought they were getting very excited and thought they were talking to somebody in the UK. So it can happen even if you're using the right call sign.
Yeah. Leslie, what's your thoughts, mate?
I'm just chuckling in the background. What can I say? There was a thing in Chingford many, many years ago, and if there was 3 radio amateurs in a town, there was 2 radio clubs, which sort of says a lot. and this lock thing, I don't know about FT8, but it sounds about as easy to open as a bag of crisp. Some people are like that, and somebody's got to relook at the system and figure out how to stop this occurring. There's people, mischievous fingers, shall we say, mischievous fingers.
One thing to keep in mind, and I know a locksmith who actually has what's called here the Supermaster key. What is a Supermaster key? It'll open every lock in this town. Okay? Because it's the locksmith that gets called out to corporations and others, and where they've installed the locks. Locks are not for locksmiths. They're for people that don't know how to pick them.
Too true, Frank. Too true. I thought you were going to say the key was what our police call the big red key, which is a battering ram, effectively.
Well, yeah, there's that. But see, I didn't know there was a Supermaster key. That is one key that would open all the locks. And you think about it, the locksmith who's got maybe a key that will open most of them, he dies, gets run over by a dump truck, whatever. Then you can't service the lock. So it makes some sense. But anyway, it's bad motives, and unfortunately some rethinking of that. But look, you made the point.
Yeah.
Sideband or CW, you can lie about your location in that mode. So it's not really anything unique to FT8. It's got to do with integrity. Unfortunately, we have enough hams who lack that.
Too true on that one. Let's move on and go from there. Still in the States, but I'm not going to give it to you first this time, Frank, because you've been first a couple of times. Chris, the States have got National Preparedness Month, and a lot about National Preparedness Month is making sure you're ready to be able to go out and help out if need be, but also looking after your own family. What do you think? Agreed.
I think, and it's not just about, like you say, about radio. This is about just being prepared generally, and I think we should all be prepared. It's something that I tend to be perhaps a bit over-prepared sometimes. People accuse me of having having too much stuff for this sort of thing. But I think this makes sense. I think it's just a reminder, isn't it? There's lots of these months and days of the year where, it's National Donut Day or something, that sort of thing. But I think this one's an important one because it's just a reminder, isn't it, that once a year, perhaps just think about what might happen in different scenarios and how you might prepare yourself. It can be quite simple. Make sure you got a first aid kit, perhaps having a generator or, think about what the sort of things that could happen, particularly in the parts of the world that you're in. We're quite lucky here in the UK that we don't really suffer too much from natural disasters. We don't have earthquakes or hurricanes, particularly in this part of the world, which I know they do have in other parts of the world, sadly. So it's just understanding what the risks are and then making sure that you've got the, perhaps have a little bit of a plan to help yourself, because often the authorities can't help everyone straight away. Things like flooding, you might want to think about maybe if you live in a floodplain, maybe have some sandbags in your garage just in case, because that if it just starts to flood, you're not going to be the priority in getting sandbags to your house to deal with it, or pumps, that sort of thing. So perhaps just have a little bit of think about what might happen, and just have a little bit of a plan and just have a little bit of stuff there that might help you. And certainly when it comes to communications, we all know that amateur radio is going to work no matter what else, pretty much. As long as you've got some sort of power supply, battery or something, and a radio and an aerial, you're on the air and you can communicate, unlike perhaps cell phones or mobile phones or the internet. So we've got the extra capabilities, amateur radio operators, to be able to assist other people as well. So that's what I think.
Yeah. Well, as I say, being prepared is always a good thing. Leslie, are you prepared?
Yeah, I used to be a scout many years ago. So, look, in this country, we don't have we have floods and things, and they occur. I think we've had bad weather, snow in the past, but in other countries it's a lot worse, a lot more devastating. And what you have to say is, like Chris has alluded to, you've got to sort of make some sort of plan about what you're going to do. That especially those first sort of couple of days, and unfortunately assume that the state is not going to help you straight away. It's about you looking after yourself, looking after your family first, and once you've got that, then you can help other people. I think that's a golden rule on that one. Can't help anyone else unless you're all right first. So anyway, yeah, I agree with this fully. Over to you, Martin.
Yeah, no problems at all, Leslie, on that one. And understandably, I mean, even silly little things like here, I've got a LED strip light thing supposedly for decorating or working outside when the light gets dark or one thing or another. But I keep it charged in the winter just in case I have a power cut. I don't want to sit in the dark for a couple of hours while we got a power cut. So even silly little things like that are partial preparedness. Yeah. Frank, this is a US story, and you probably know more about this than we do. So what's your thoughts?
Well, the guy who was hired, I don't know, a couple of years ago from the state of Arkansas, Josh Johnston, KE5MHV, who's the ARRL Director of Emergency Management, has, I think, really been doing a good job trying to get things shored up in terms of what the ARRL ARES program is about and what they do. Here's my take on this. Being prepared is as much of an attitude as any one specific thing that you do. And focusing on family safety is an important one. We run on electric power. I mean, I think the developed world is about electric power. And for just a small thing, I too built a light like that, a little inexpensive ammo can for $3 at Academy Sports, a big chain store, and they go on sale. I usually buy one or two and put them up, and I find a use for them. A $10 LED rectangle off of eBay, an extra LiFePo battery. You build a light, you turn it on, it lights up, your entire yard. It can also help you when you're trying to figure out whether it's a pair of navy blue slacks or black, in case anyone has a hard time telling colors if you don't have really, really bright light. But a practical thing for me, I'm on CPAP. I have severe obstructive sleep apnea. So if the power goes out suddenly, we have storms, we have a lot of trees, it goes over power lines, you do the math. So I have a battery and a connector system that I put together, and it will run my CPAP machine for really several days, as the case may be. We were out of power for about 3 days, about 9 months ago. And one of the battery systems I made kept my CPAP machine going. It kept our cell phones and iPads and things charged. We watched TV on our iPads during that period of time and that sort of thing. So I'm not holding myself up as a model of being prepared, but sometimes these small things are a part of an attitude and thinking as a ham radio operator. Oh, I've got this extra battery. Oh, I've got this case. What can I do with it that will work when electric power is out? And so electric power, I've got about 4 100 amp hour battery boxes that I've built over a couple of years, and a couple of them have pure sine wave inverters and things. So it's about an attitude to me, Martin.
Yeah, it certainly is, Frank. And yeah, as I say, I always keep my my couple of Go portable batteries charged as well, just in case. But yeah, and my big battery box has got USB connectors on it, so Mrs. B can charge her tablet even if we have a power outage. Hi. Anyway, let's move on. Over there in Canada, Canadian teens gain licenses after a ham radio coursework, and it looks like 21 teenagers. Oh, you heard that correctly. 21 teenagers in British Columbia became amateurs. They did their coursework just as the school year was starting, and I think it's a really good one. Frank, what's your thoughts on this one?
Well, it's a very good thing, I think. Adam VE7ZAL, and John VE7TI reporting on this in the September-October issue of The Communicator. It's a magazine that the Surrey Amateur Radio Communications Club puts out, and I've been reading it for several years, and it's magnificent. It's free, and I recommend it. We'll have a link to where you can get it in the show notes. But they've actually got this now. Adam, VE7ZAL, is a robotics teacher at a secondary school in Surrey in British Columbia. Now, robotics, think maker spaces and things like that. We had a robotics teacher here in Ridgeland, where I live, who did balloon launches. And my wife and I donated a little bit of money to buy some of the technology and things. And it was just amazing. He's since retired and is teaching at a different school, so he's not doing that there. There's the weakness of getting in schools as people move on. But they got this in the curriculum, and it's kind of in that maker space, but in a school. And very quickly, almost 24 got their Canadian amateur radio certificate. So it's a very good thing to look at if you have an inside connection to a school, Martin.
Yeah, as I say, technology, I honestly do believe that if you are able to show youngsters technology, they will rip your hand off for more information. Getting the initial contact is the hardest part, but 20-odd there, that's brilliant. Chris, what's your thoughts?
Well, I think you said it just then. It's brilliant. 21 people have got a license. 21 young people have got a license. This is fantastic. And the fact that it was done, the fact we've got people on the air, the fact we've got these guys, well, not we, the guys over there have got themselves a license is, I think, just fabulous. And I don't think there's much more I can say, really. I think it's great that we've got this, these guys have got together and made it happen. And I think there's an awful lot of education. I keep saying this a number of times. I think when it comes to education, amateur radio's got an awful lot to offer. We talk about science stuff and mathematics, there's history stuff in there, there's communication, there's a huge range of things that it helps the teachers and the life skills. You go away from an amateur radio course and you've got some of those skills that you take forward in, fitting a plug. That's not something that you just do on an amateur radio course. Being able to do that in the real world is actually incredibly useful. Being able to solder, you can repair things suddenly. You learn a huge number of skills by getting an amateur radio license and being involved in the hobby. So I think it's a great thing, not just for kind of formal education reasons, but actually for the kind of life reasons as well. So no, I think this is great news.
Yeah, I agree with you. On that one, and it is good. And I've learnt so much through amateur radio, and sometimes it's technical, other times it's talking to somebody else about something that's not amateur radio, but it's all education. Leslie, have we left you anything to say on this one?
Well, I think you covered most of it, everyone. It's an excellent story, and it grabs the youngsters, and they gain interest, and they get the bug, and they're away. The other thing I've noticed as well is it gets them a lot with what I call hand skills. You're talking about soldering and putting things together and repairing things. That's not normally tested in an exam, but it's fundamental for life. How do I repair this? Whatever way, it could be anything. And the other thing I picked up on this story is very, very important to have a champion within the organisation that champions whatever it is. It could be anything. It could be basketball, table tennis, or and once you get that person, the teenagers will just flock, and the youngsters will just flock to it. Anyway, that's all I've got to say. Like I said, it's an excellent story.
Yeah, I agree with you, mate. I agree with you. Right, moving to our last news story, and it's a very similar story because this is once again youngsters. At least we've had a bit of youth activity going on, because everybody talks about getting youth in the hobby. But Sri Lankan Girl Guides, the Girl Guides, or sometimes known as Girl Scouts in other parts of the world, find power in amateur radio. Frank, I'm going to let you go first on this one again. This is great news because ladies in that part of the world are not always have access to this sort of thing, do they?
No, it's cultural practices and culture of the values placed on men and women in terms of what they should do in terms of belief system. So the Girl Guides in Sri Lanka got some help from the Radio Society of Sri Lanka, and they included them in their Girl Guide camp. Our scouts here in the States, we have this big jamboree, and amateur radio with Jamboree on the Air, we've been integral to that for probably decades at this point, but this is fairly new. And so this was a group of about 2,000 Girl Guides from Sri Lanka's 9 provinces, and they were directly exposed through the Radio Society of Sri Lanka there. And I just find it amazing.
Well, so do I, mate. And it is a good one. Leslie, young ladies in the hobby, we could always do with more, couldn't we? Instead of all us grumpy old men.
Grumpy old men. You mean Victor Meldrews on steroids, This is another excellent story. It's about getting the hobby out there, getting young ladies involved. We don't want grumpy lots. So, we'll all move over and they'll take over. Oh, that's fine. It's learning skills, life skills, and that's it gets them on that road. And once they get the technology bug, you've got no idea where it's going to go. It's a great story. Over to you, Martin.
Yeah, no problems at all. Well, as I say, I think it's a good one. I mean, Karen joining us on the podcast and having a different perspective to all us grumpy old men has been educated me in many ways, and we've had quite fun. So, yeah.
I should actually explain, Martin, to our American listeners that Victor Meldrews is a television series with a rather grumpy person. So if somebody didn't quite get our bit of humour, that's what it was all about.
Yeah, certainly was. He walked around and go, I don't believe it, and complain about everything. But, yeah. Chris, have we left you anything to say on this one?
That was an uncannily good Impersonation there, Martin. I'm joking. Yes, another great story about getting youngsters involved in amateur radio. This time, it just says that they had 2,000 girl guides at this event back in August, 23rd of August. So the Radio Society of Sri Lanka really saw this as an opportunity to promote a hobby, get these girls involved. But 2,000 is a lot of people to showcase this. So I think all hands to them. So, it says they talked about demonstrating HF, VHF, and Echolink, which are all very valid ways of communicating. So I think it was a great opportunity for the amateur radio community to really showcase what amateur radio is all about. And of those 2,000, well, hopefully we get a few that might take it to the next level and decide to perhaps investigate, maybe even get a license or something. So that's great news, and well done to the guys in Sri Lanka for doing that.
Yeah, so I think we're all agreed. There's been a couple of nice stories at the end. I know we started off in quite a horrible news article, which had to be done, but the last two nice ones of getting youth into our hobby, which everybody keeps telling us we've got to get youth in. So I think that works very, very well. Okay, let's find out what the guys have been up to since the last time we spoke to them. Frank, what have you been up to?
Well, I've been still experimenting with building some vertical antennas with the telescoping whips. I mentioned, I think last time, I built a easy build 10-meter version using 3 8-foot whips and with elevated radials mounted at 45-degree angle to get the impedance up to about 50 ohms. And it resonates about 28.3 megahertz. I'll do a club talk over in Vicksburg to a technical working group next month on easy build. 10 meters is hot right now. It's a good time to have a good, efficient 10-meter ground plane, basically. So I've been fooling around with those. Been working on a 20-meter version using the 18-foot whips. Been getting into some of the physics theory over exactly what an elevated ground plane as opposed to radials on the ground. Fairly knowledgeable about what that does in coupling to the ground and ground losses. But what does an elevated ground plane do for the system? We know it makes it more efficient and so on and so on. And I've got a 4 radial with 4 whips mounted. And I'm interested in if 4 radials, and we always have this debate, if 1 will work, okay, anything will work. If 2 is better, if 3 or 4 is even better, what would a solid surface be like? And so I've got an idea to transform the 4 radial system, elevated radial system, into a solid surface. So I'm now doing a lot of reading on the physics of what an elevated ground plane is about and does, and what drives that. And so doing a lot of head scratching and reading now to see if my idea is worth pursuing. The second thing I've been doing is I'm continuing to experiment with AI-based OCR, optical character recognition tools. I've had for several years a project penciled up to create a database of hams for each decade from 1910 to 1990 in the U.S. using call books that were published and are available on the Internet Archive in PDF format. Now, some of these are kind of challenging images into PDFs. To extract the text from them can be a real challenge. To optically digitize them can be another. But I've got some results based upon about 10 pages, and they are very, very, very good, as in no mistakes on a small sample. Almost phenomenal. Martin, I've showed you that when we've had a private Zoom call a little bit. But this is experimental. In 1940, they went to 3 columns, and believe it or not, getting 3 columns into 1 column is not so easy. If you want to automate it, you can do it by hand very easily. But once I am able to get each year over those decades, I'll geocode the extracted records and see if we can get maps on where the earliest hams were and where they built out and grew over the U.S. over, since the ham radio's beginning. I have year 2000 and beyond from actual FCC records, so I'll add that to it. So that's a long-term kind of statistical history project. And finally, I'm a sucker for good deals on workbench test gear. Martin, you, Chris, and Colin got a chance to see my workbench while you were over here, and I'm a sucker for better workbench test gear. And I've got a couple of LCR meters that measure inductance, capacitance, and resistance in a certain frequency range. But my frequency range tops out at about 100 kilohertz on what I've had. I was able to do two things. I scored an open box matrix LCR meter, goes up to 200 kilohertz. It's made in China and gets very good reviews. Got it for half price. Still had the sticker on the screen, and it works superbly. I've got some test fixtures to go with it that are in shipment, so I can test through-hole and SMD parts, as well as the Kelvin clips there. But what's the fun in getting one good deal when you can get another one? I got an HP 4275A LCR meter that goes up to 10.7 megahertz for $400 on eBay from a recycler. It retailed for about $13,000 new back in the day. I hope the seller's pictures are truthful as it passed the self-test. The calibration tests are the key ones, and I'll be able to tell that when it arrives in a few days. I will refer interested listeners the popular YouTube channel IMSAI guy that has the normal, abnormal lights that come on as the intro, has an 8-part series on the 4275A LCR meter. When he bought one for $200 at a Hamfest and went through it, had to do a little bit of calibration and some things. So I've got a guidebook on taking what was something that I would never have purchased anywhere when it was new to add to my workbench. So a couple of the LCR meters I've got now will go to friends who are building their benches. So with those things and several VNAs that I have that go into the gigahertz range, I should be covered with impedance measurements for the foreseeable future, Martin. That's kind of what I've been up to.
Yeah, well, I also watched that YouTube channel, and I remember him rebuilding that LCR meter, and it was interesting. Gentlemen, sometimes he's brilliant. I've got to tell you, he's brilliant, but there's sometimes, odd times, I sit there and I see something he hasn't quite seen, and he's videoing it, and then about 2 minutes later, he's, oh, it's this. And I'm thinking, I'm almost shouting at the screen, but very rarely, very, very rarely, because he is a very interesting guy. And in fairness, I've learned a hell of a lot from that man as well. So I'm not knocking him in any way, shape or form. But good news, Frank, on that. And as I say, you'll enjoy playing. I know you will. Right. Leslie, what have you been up to?
Oh, a few bits and pieces, Martin. The first one I'm going to mention is a shout out to Tom of the Silverthorne Radio Club. Tom and Peter, what happened? They gave a talk on microlights. You know, we have people on different topics and everything else, and they got their 2 microlights and they trolled them up and they rolled them into the car park and they put the wings on them. The local boys in blue, i.e. the police, turned up. It caused an absolute mayhem on the local Chingford Facebook page. You can't fly that in there, and where's a James Bond suit, and all sorts of comments like that. But I was giggling in the background because it gave the club more publicity than we could ever pay for. So I was delighted from that, and the local people come around. What's these aircraft being parked in the car park and all that? So that was an absolute great talk by Tom. The other thing we did was the Silverthorne Radio Club annual camp in August. As in every bank holiday, it poured down with rain on the Friday and most of Saturday. I think Saturday afternoon we started to dry out. But HF condition. Oh, we had a new marquee as well, which cost the club a fortune. I'm the treasurer, so I was grumbling about that. But I have to say, it's an excellent marquee. HF conditions were excellent, especially with the Wyndham that Bob brought up. the rain, and we had the usual repairs, trying to fix stuff, cables broken, and just fixing stuff in the field. So that was all good fun. And what else? If you remember, Martin, I did a talk on fault finding a few years back. Well, I'm going to be doing that again this Friday at my local club, because they asked me to dig it out, and I've cut it all down and redone it, and I think I'm going to run that this Friday. So hopefully, fingers crossed, see how it goes. Over to you.
Yeah, Roger on that one. Well, it's still TBA, but I'm supposed to be doing at least one talk for the Dover Amateur Radio Society. It will be online because it's about a 90 mile each way for me to Dover. So, yeah. But, I know what you mean. It's great fun when you do those ones. Chris, what have you been up to since last time we spoke?
Yeah, not a huge amount. Unfortunately, I've had a family bereavement, so not had a lot of time to do radio stuff. Unfortunately, I missed SSB Field Day, which is the annual contest that our club gets involved in. But I must say, they did very well. The club, I think, as reported by Frank, the sunspot cycle this time is really, I think this may have something to do with it. It's really working, because we managed to make, I sadly wasn't there, but 365 QSOs, which is actually a record. I've done that contest for the last 10 or so years, minus the COVID years when it didn't happen. But that's definitely a record in that time frame anyway. So I think the sunspot cycles, and the guys obviously work very hard to make the many contacts. But I think certainly the sunspots, the solar cycle, I think is certainly would have helped us with that. And as Leslie was just saying, I saw the videos. It was an extremely wet weekend to be sat in the field in a tent operating a radio. So well done to the guys for doing that. Monday night, I was up at the Radio Club. Martin, you were there as well, and there was an ISS pass, so we decided to go out into the car park. It was a very clear, crisp night. I think autumn, or as our American colleagues call it, fall, has now arrived. And certainly the nights are starting to get a little bit colder, and it was a very clear night Monday night, see all the stars, and I spotted on the app that the ISS was coming over. So we went out into the car park around about 9:15 and watched it come over, and on the handheld I tuned into the repeater on the ISS, and there were lots and lots and lots of stations all from all over Europe, all talking to us. So it's great that that's being used, and it was great that I could pick that up just on a handheld. We have had a couple of new members of the club, and they were quite impressed to see that. I think it's quite impressive to watch this light in the sky passing over, and then be able to actually hear people talking through it. I think it's quite a good demonstration of amateur radio and how simple it can be. I know, Martin, you were pointing out to some other people what was going on above our heads, and I think they were quite surprised as well. And then last night we had a club talk on the history of Morse keys, which I actually thought was very good. And the guy doing it did a great job of talking all about lots of different, really right from the days of the telegraph through to modern times, how the Morse keys have evolved, and yeah, it was very interesting. So that's probably it from me, Martin.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you've been reasonably busy. Yeah, I was going to say, while you guys were listening and to the ISS and going over, we go to the Scout Hall, but we pass the Church Hall to get to the Scout Hall. And in the Scout Hall, the Church Hall, is some ladies' Keep Fit class goes on. And the ladies were turning out at about 9 o'clock UK time when the ISS went over. And I said to a couple of them, that bright light up there, that's the International Space Station. And they were absolutely gobsmacked. They didn't think we could actually see it. So, yeah. An opportunity to talk to the public as well. I kind of got lots of disjointed stuff, so I'm going to apologise for some of this. I've started playing just for a bit of fun. I've got a function generator, and I needed to do an alignment on an AM radio, and I thought, do I get the signal generator out, or do I use the function generator? And the beauty of the function generator is I can tap in the exact frequency I want and the modulation and all those sort of things. And I actually quite enjoyed doing the alignment with my function generator. So guys, I'm not saying it's the right way to do it, but if you haven't got a signal generator and you've got a function generator, certainly up to HF, you should be able to do it on a function generator. And I say my function generator goes up to 60 megs, so I could probably do up as far as about 6 meters on mine and get away with it. Few chats on the talk group, not as many as I'd like, but it's been a bit busier. I see people there all the time. Training wise, I've been running 2 training sessions a week with one of my students, and I've actually now, Chris, almost completed the updated training slides if we do another foundation course. I've also, and you've seen part of it, it's moved on since the document I gave you, but I've been working on a revision document for people who want to revise the course notes as well. That, I think, could be very useful not only for people who are on the course, but equally for anybody who's recently or in the last few years, say, done a foundation course. There are now new items that are in the course that they would never have learnt about. So it's just revision notes, and I'm going to let people have a look at it. Also, I've not been around much. I didn't make field day and other bits and pieces because I've been kind of doing family jobs, a couple of electrical jobs for my daughter and my other son in the UK. We're feeding my daughter's tropical fish at the moment because she's away, back tomorrow actually. And it's just been busy, mate. I just don't know where the time's gone. Oh, and I did harass Frank for a little while last week. But we had a great chat, Frank, and I enjoyed that. So, not a lot of radio from me, but I have been fairly busy. So I'd like to thank each of you for joining me tonight. I think it's been fun. I've enjoyed myself. I'd like to thank Mr. Frank Howell, K4FMH.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, no problems, Frank. I'd like to thank Mr. Leslie Butterfields, G0CIB.
Thanks for the invite, Martin. Always a pleasure.
No probs. And last but not least, I'd like to thank Mr. Chris Howard, M0TCH.
Yeah, thanks, Martin. Thanks, guys. Another fun episode.
Yeah, all fun. It was really right. 73 guys, and we'll catch up with you another day, and I'll move on to the next part of the podcast. 73s.
Cheerio.
73.
The ICQ Amateur Ham Radio Podcast, serving the amateur ham radio community fortnightly since 2008.
And now it's time to have a look at the news in brief from me, Colin M6BOY. We start with news here in Australia, where the Australian Communications and Media Authority have advised of a new licensing related fees as of this September. New fees will be required when reconfirming or reassigning a special event or contest call sign. These call signs can be held for a 12-month period after being renewed. So you're looking at a special event call sign being $34 Australian. The reassign of a VK0 or VK9 call sign will be $34. Reassigning a contest call sign will be $15. And transferring a call sign to another amateur radio operator will also be $15 Australian. So news there of a change of fees as of this month in Australia. Now in the UK, the success of online exams has become very evident, where now 97% of amateur radio licence examinations were sat using the online Test Reach platform, either at home or under remote supervision. But with this comes news that they'll be ending soon the paper examination option, and this will be ending by the end of the year. So anybody who wants to take a paper exam needs to obviously do this ASAP to get in time. If not, I say it'll be a online assessment that will be done either say at home or in a controlled environment. So news there, as I say in the UK, as I say exams are now going to all be done online. Right, now we're going to head up to our features episode, which is Amateur Radio Book Review for 2024. Some gems in there, guys. Hope you enjoy.
And now for this episode's feature from the ICQ podcast.
Hi guys, for this feature I wanted to mention a few technical books that I've bought over the last few months. Now for those who know me well, I'm a glutton for punishment on books, and Mrs. B says to me, do you need any more of them? And my answer is always yes. I have a reasonable technical library. I love rummaging in rallies below the book stands or below the tables to see what books are available. The only disappointment I have now is I've got a large proportion of them. There are not that many I find that I haven't got. Anyway, moving on, I thought I'd give you a quick introduction to some of these books that I've been looking at recently. So it's not going to be a long feature. Now, our Frank, K4FMH, gave me when I was out in the States a network vector analyzer. And I brought it back. It needed reprogramming. I had that done, and you've probably heard me talk about that on the podcast before. One of the things Frank said to me, he said, Martin, he said, you've got to get the book that they sell. And he was quite right. Now, this is for a particular vector network analyzer, but I'm sure it would work with many others. It's a really, really interesting book. Not cheap. The book title is Measurements with the DG8 SAQ VNWA 2/3 vector analyzer. What a mouthful. It's a book written by Fried Palmer, and it says it's for beginners. Trust me, guys, there's some interesting stuff in here. And it takes you through that particular network analyzer, the basic functions of it, the reference planes, calibration, and various measurements that the guys set up. As I said, not cheap, but a very, very interesting book. If you're into measurement and testing and those sort of things, and you have a vector network analyzer, you may very well want to have a look at this book. I think it was a great book. Now, I know it was something like £30+, but I think it's worth every penny, in fairness. This book can be purchased from SDR Kits, so don't have much more details than that. I bought it from SDR Kits. They're the people that also sell that particular vector network analyzer. So a lovely book to have a look at, and it'll certainly keep you busy for ages. Number 2, and I know Frank's got this one as well, because I gave it to him. Hi. We have a book called Testing 123, and it's measuring amateur radio performance on a budget. Now, this book is quite interesting because it takes you through lots of different tests you can do. It gives you advice on the equipment that you could buy or shouldn't buy. Sometimes the guy said, I wouldn't buy this. But equally, I think sometimes it's nice, and I've been reading and going, yeah, well, I've actually got one of those piece of equipment. But once again, it's a great book. It's written by Andrew Barron, ZL3DW, and really interesting. However, it depends on what you want to do on the testing. You know, if you're not going to be a professional tester writing specs and reviews on magazines, then this is just an interesting book to read, to understand what some of these tests are and how you would go about doing them if you wanted to do them. I don't say I'm going to do every test in there, but I thought it was a very good read, and it keeps me out of trouble at times. So, nice little book there from Andrew Barron, and well worth a look. Now, my third book, and we're going on to this. You heard me say I was very upset at the GQRP Club because I couldn't get the 50 years of GQRP. Well, I did manage to get a copy while I was up in Telford. It was on the RSGB stand. So I bought one. And this book has been edited by our own Ed Durant, DD5LP, who helped put this together for them. And in fairness, it's a great little book. If somebody was interested in wanting to find out, is it worth me joining the GQRP club? Well, this would be a great book to first off have a look and see if you're interested in QRP and bits and pieces. Now, it has in there obviously a preference and a list of contents, but it talks about the 50 years of the GQRP club, George Dobbs's obituary, G3RJW. But then it then goes on to how you can join the club. And then what's happened in this book is they've taken a number of circuits and postings that were in the GQRP magazine, Sprat, that comes out once a quarter. And Ed has managed to republish a number of these articles in this book to give you a flavour of what the GQRP Club's all about. So there's chapters on transmitters, receivers, transceivers, aerial systems, test equipment, which is something I always find interesting, and equally a lot of test equipment for getting QRP stuff working is often very, very simple. And then there's a section on miscellaneous stuff, which is very, very interesting. Now, the last one I'm going to talk about today, because I did say this wasn't going to be a long feature. When you're out and about, if you come across a old-fashioned bookstall, go in and have a look. You know, it's well worth. You never know what you're going to find. I mean, if I come across a second-hand bookshop, I think it's Christmas. Even if I don't buy anything, which is very unusual, it's well worth a look. And I came across a book the other day. Now, would I have bought it? Possibly. Great little book. It cost me a couple of pounds. It's Analog Electronics, and it talks about analog circuitry explained by a gentleman called Ian Hickman. And this is a great little book. One of many, I'm sure you can find. But it's got circuitry in there and explains how circuits work. It's got a fair amount of maths in it if you're a maths person. And, you know, these sort of bookshops are well worth a look. Along with, as I said earlier, check under the stands that people have, because often they just leave their books on the floor in a box. And you can pick up some really, really interesting books along the way. Now, I'm going to upset everybody now and say Christmas is coming. You know, maybe this is one of these books might just be of interest to you. Might just be worth dropping a hint around the family what you're looking for. That way you won't end up with another pair of socks. Hi. I hope this was of interest. Thanks very much.
Well, everybody, I really hope you enjoyed our book review. And these are always very interesting features that we do every so often, and could be a great opportunity for you to suggest ideas with, say, Christmas coming up at the end of the year, etc. Or there might be a birthday coming up, or say something to add to the bookshelf. So I really hope something of interest there. And I know, Dad, you love to have a good rummage around the books at rallies and things on those lines, and certainly a good collection there to review and to update the listeners on what's out there.
Yeah, it certainly is, Colin. And as I said in the feature, you know, I like to rummage. There are less and less of the good ones that I find at rallies these days because I've already got a lot of them, but certainly worth a look. And just because a book's old doesn't mean that it hasn't got good information in it. I mean, I've come across some really old books and they've had information that I think people have just forgotten about, you know. So sometimes the old books from, say, the 20s, 30s, 40s have little techniques that you think, oh, right, that makes sense. So everything's worth a look.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, it's a bit like, as I say, sitting down having a good chat there with, as they say, an old timer about something and learning something really cool in the meantime. So, as you say, certainly a good tip there to not be dismissive of a classic book that might have a fantastic piece of a nugget bit of information there. So, no, certainly a good shout there. Right. Well, as I say, just for people to listen out for, as mentioned in the last show, episode 438, I'll be in Belfast next weekend at the end of the September, and I'm going to do my best to try and get on air. So hopefully my call sign will be up and about in the Northern Ireland Belfast district. As I say, I'll be potentially can use my license there, which is always a good positive. And in the meantime as well, if you can catch up with some of your favourite ICQ podcast presenters during the downtime between episodes by visiting the ICQ podcast talk group. We haven't mentioned it for a few episodes, but so if you go to digital talkgroup.icqpodcast.com, you can find out the information there of how you can get your digital radio onto that group. And as I say, talk away there with your favourite ICQ podcast presenter, and certainly catch up with what they're up to. And say, test out that one for radio. And it's a great way because it's not restricted to any particular generation or any type of module. We've worked out a way to bring all the digital worlds together for you, so you can have fun with your digital radio and talk to your fellow amateur radio listeners and presenters. So hope you check that out. Okay, so we'd like to thank our friends who took part in the news roundtable with us this episode. So we'd like to thank Chris, Mike 0 Tango Charlie Hotel, and Frank Kilo 4 Foxtrot Mike Hotel, and Leslie Golf 0 Charlie India Bravo for taking part in the news roundtable. Guys, we really appreciate your time and your thoughts, and really hope they've generated you some thoughts as well about our hobby and what's going on there. So it'll be fantastic fun there. Right, well, that just wraps up episode 439 of your ICQ Amateur Radio Podcast. We would like you, obviously, if you've enjoyed the show and got value from it, please go to icqpodcast.com/donate, where to say you can help us out and keep your show alive and running for you. And say we'd appreciate any help you can give us there. And as I say, the last thing to do is a really important job where, as I say, we need to look and for a treat for Mrs. B, make her a cup of tea to go with it, and as I say, look after Mrs. B in the process.
Yeah, certainly will, Colin, very shortly. But before you go, Northern Ireland, you'll be MI6. But you don't legally anymore in the new license have to put the I in. You could just use your straight UK call of M6. But I'm sure MI6 has an interesting flavour and you'll probably get used. And last thing is Mrs. B and I and a couple of the other guys from the ICQ podcast will be at the National Hamfest in Newark on the coming Friday after this podcast gets released. So with that note underway, I'm going off to make Mrs. B a drink and find something nice.
Fantastic. When anybody wants to understand the connotations of why MI6 can be problematic in Northern Ireland, I'll take those messages offline, as they say. Yeah, that can be problematic. So no problems at all. We'll bid 73s to everybody. And as I say, we hope you obviously continue to enjoy our wonderful hobby. And we'll catch you again in a fortnight's time. 73s.
Yeah, 73.